Have you ever found yourself repeating the same relationship mistakes despite promising yourself never again? These patterns aren't random glitches in your personality. They're clues pointing to invisible psychological wounds controlling your life from the shadows. In the next 12 minutes, I'll help you peel back the layers of your mental architecture to reveal these hidden forces. You'll discover why certain situations trigger intense emotional reactions and gain the tools to finally break free from these subconscious patterns that have been pulling you in circles for far too long. The shadow self, your hidden director. What if the most powerful force shaping your life is something you can't even see? Something that operates silently, making critical decisions for you without your permission or awareness. This invisible influence might be responsible for your recurring relationship patterns, career choices, and even those moments when you snap at someone you love for seemingly no reason. Let's talk about what Carl Jung called the shadow. In Jung's psychology, the shadow is a powerful part of your unconscious mind that stores everything you've rejected, repressed, or denied about yourself. Think of it as a psychological reservoir containing all the traits, impulses, and memories that didn't fit with your conscious self-image or that others told you were unacceptable. The shadow forms early in life. As children, we quickly learn which parts of ourselves receive approval and which parts trigger negative reactions. Maybe you were told that anger wasn't acceptable in your household, or perhaps your natural sensitivity was met with ridicule. Over time, you learn to push these parts of yourself into the shadows, not because they disappeared, but because acknowledging them became too painful. Imagine yourself carefully preparing for an important meeting, determined to stay calm and professional. Then your colleague makes a minor comment about your presentation, and suddenly you're snapping at them with unexpected intensity. That's your shadow taking over, like an uninvited co-pilot grabbing the steering wheel during turbulence, especially when emotions run high. Think about times you've said, "I don't know what came over me," or "that wasn't like me at all." These moments reveal your shadow at work. The shadow acts on its own programming, using emotional triggers as its activation code, without consulting your conscious mind. But here's something crucial most people miss. The shadow isn't just a dark, negative force. It also contains positive qualities you've disowned. Perhaps you were raised in a family where showing ambition was frowned upon, so you pushed your natural drive and leadership abilities into the shadow. Or maybe your creativity was dismissed as impractical, causing you to disown this vital part of yourself. These golden shadow elements represent some of your greatest untapped potential. Research in depth psychology shows that repressed aspects of ourselves form what Jung called complexes, emotionally charged clusters that function almost like independent personalities within us. A study by the Journal of Analytical Psychology found these unconscious complexes significantly impact decision-making, explaining why someone might repeatedly choose unsuitable romantic partners despite conscious intentions to break the pattern. Your shadow contains both personal rejections and the collective expectations of your family system, cultural background, and societal norms. Picture a child who learns that expressing needs is selfish. They push their natural self-advocacy into the shadow, where it later emerges in indirect ways, like agreeing to excessive work demands, then resenting it afterward. Imagine your personality as an iceberg. The small portion visible above water represents your conscious self, the person you know yourself to be. Beneath the surface lies the vast majority, your unconscious mind, with the shadow occupying much of this hidden territory. While invisible, this unseen mass determines the iceberg's movement and stability. This metaphor explains why surface-level attempts to change often fail. You might try being more assertive at work, but if your shadow contains strong programming against speaking up, your conscious efforts will be undermined by this larger hidden force. There are telltale signs that your shadow is influencing you. Pay attention to your overreactions, moments when your emotional response seems disproportionate to the situation. Notice your projections. When you're intensely bothered by someone else's qualities, they often mirror disowned aspects of yourself. And watch for recurring patterns that you consciously wish to change, but somehow keep repeating. This insight reveals why you keep making the same mistakes despite knowing better. It's not a failure of willpower or intelligence. Your conscious mind isn't making the decisions, your shadow is. When you decide to set healthy boundaries, but then find yourself saying yes to everyone's requests, the part of you that fears rejection is operating from the shadow, overriding your intentions. Think about areas in your life where you feel stuck in patterns you can't seem to break. These are likely places where shadow material is actively directing your choices, invisible to your conscious awareness, but powerful enough to shape your entire life trajectory. Wound recognition, the emotional fingerprints. Those recurring patterns reveal more than just psychological habits. They leave distinct emotional fingerprints in your body. Have you ever experienced that moment when a seemingly minor event sends you into an emotional tailspin that feels wildly out of proportion? What's happening in your body during those moments isn't just an overreaction. It's your nervous system recognizing a threat pattern from your past. These emotional triggers function as unique identifiers, fingerprints that point directly to your underlying wounds. They bypass your rational mind completely. Your coworker offers routine feedback in a meeting, and suddenly your heart races, your chest tightens, and you're fighting back tears. Your logical mind knows it's not a personal attack, but your body responds as if you're under threat. This disconnection between what you logically understand and how your body responds signals a wound-triggered reaction rather than a normal emotional response. Your body activates ancient neural pathways formed during earlier painful experiences, essentially hijacking your thought process. Consider Sarah, who froze completely during a team presentation when her manager interrupted with a clarifying question. Her mind went blank, her palms sweated, and she felt like a small child being scolded. Later, she realized this physical response mirrored exactly how she felt when her critical father would question her childhood accomplishments. Her body was responding to a worthiness wound from decades earlier, not the present moment. What separates a normal emotional reaction from a wound-triggered one? Think of it like a smoke alarm. A functioning alarm beeps appropriately when there's actual smoke, a healthy response. But a malfunctioning alarm blares at full volume from a tiny bit of steam, a wound-triggered reaction. The difference lies in intensity, duration, and proportion. A healthy response matches the situation and gradually subsides. A wound-triggered reaction floods your system with overwhelming emotion that feels impossible to regulate, continuing long after the triggering event has passed. During these triggered moments, your body responds to a threat pattern from your past, not present reality. The racing heart, tunnel vision, and overwhelming emotions show your nervous system in protection mode. Trauma fundamentally alters how your brain processes information. When you experience something overwhelming, especially in childhood, those memories remain active in your nervous system, creating unique physiological response patterns that can be activated by similar situations years later. This explains why certain triggering scenarios appear consistently across different areas of your life. You might become irrationally jealous in relationships when your partner needs space, feel crippling shame at work after receiving constructive feedback, or feel invisible during family gatherings that transport you back to childhood feelings. These reactions form a consistent pattern across different contexts. One of the most disorienting aspects is the time distortion that occurs. Many people report feeling like a child again during these moments, in their entire body, not just emotionally. Your adult perspective temporarily vanishes as your nervous system responds from the developmental stage when the original wound occurred. By tracking when and how these triggering events occur, you can map your personal pattern of wounds with remarkable precision. If intense anxiety arises whenever someone close to you runs late, this might point to an abandonment wound. If minor criticism sends you into a shame spiral that lasts for days, this could reveal a worthiness wound. The body's response provides valuable information. Chronic stress from unresolved trauma doesn't just affect you emotionally, it compromises your immune system and contributes to long-term physical health complications. Your body speaks through these symptoms, highlighting wounds that need healing. What makes this process powerful is that these physical and emotional responses are messengers offering vital information. This awareness begins to create space between the trigger and your reaction, giving you the first taste of freedom from these unconscious patterns. The 4 core wounds. Understanding your personal pattern. Those emotional fingerprints we've been tracking actually point to something much deeper and more fundamental. While your triggering patterns might seem uniquely yours, psychology reveals a fascinating truth. Nearly all human suffering traces back to just 4 primary wounds that formed during our earliest years. Think about this. What if identifying your dominant wound pattern could unlock the mystery of why you keep repeating the same painful cycles in your life? These core wounds are foundational experiences that shape who you become. They develop during those critical first 7 years of life, when your brain is most impressionable and you lack the cognitive tools to process complex emotional experiences. During this vulnerable period, even seemingly minor events can leave lasting imprints on your developing psyche. The abandonment wound forms when a child experiences the physical or emotional absence of caregivers. This creates a profound sense that others will inevitably leave. Imagine Sarah, who grew up with a parent who worked unpredictable hours. Today, as an adult, she feels anxious when her partner is late coming home, that familiar knot forming in her stomach as minutes tick by. She might find herself constantly checking in on loved ones, or paradoxically pushing people away before they can leave her. In relationships, this wound manifests as difficulty with healthy space and separation. Your adult mind knows one unanswered text isn't abandonment, but your wounded inner child reacts as if experiencing that original pain all over again. Moving to our second pattern, the rejection wound creates an entirely different struggle. This forms when children receive the message they're only acceptable when behaving certain ways. Unlike abandonment, which centers on presence versus absence, rejection revolves around conditional acceptance. Think of Michael, who learned early that praise only came with perfect grades. Now he rehearses work presentations for hours, struggles to express authentic needs, and overworks to prove his value. The core belief becomes, if people saw the real me, they would reject me. His life becomes an exhausting performance rather than authentic expression. The shame wound cuts deeper into your sense of self. While rejection focuses on what you do, shame targets who you fundamentally are. This develops when a child receives messages that something about their core self is defective. Consider Emma, who was regularly compared to her prettier sister. Today, despite her successful career, she maintains a carefully constructed false self and feels like an imposter in professional settings. Even success feels tenuous because deep down, she's waiting for others to discover the truth about her inadequacy. Unlike guilt, which says I did something bad, shame whispers, I am bad. Perhaps most insidious is the unworthiness wound, which strikes at your fundamental right to exist and receive good things. This develops when children absorb the message that they are a burden or their needs are excessive. James grew up in financial hardship, where expressing needs was met with sighs or frustration. Today, he struggles to accept compliments, feels guilty for taking up space, and may unconsciously arrange situations that confirm this belief. walking away from opportunities, or diminishing his achievements. This wound creates a pervasive sense that you don't deserve happiness, love, or success. What makes these wounds so powerful is how they create trauma loops, unconscious patterns where you repeatedly recreate situations reinforcing your original injury. Your attachment style becomes the template through which you experience all future connections. This isn't happening because you're broken. It's happening because your nervous system was designed for protection, not connection. The good news? Identifying your dominant wound pattern is possible through careful self-observation. Notice which relationship dynamics consistently trigger your strongest emotional responses or which core fears drive your decisions. Pay attention to recurring dreams, relationship patterns, or professional challenges. Most people have one primary wound that dominates their psychological landscape, though all four may be present to varying degrees. Your most frustrating behaviors, the ones you've tried repeatedly to change through willpower alone, often stem directly from these core wound patterns operating through your unconscious mind. These aren't character flaws. They're adaptive responses to early pain that once protected you, but now limit your freedom and potential. The trigger wound connection, why small things hit so hard. Behind those adaptive responses lies a neurological phenomenon that explains why a casual remark from your boss can ruin your entire day, while your coworker shrugs off the exact same comment. Your brain has created invisible neural highways connecting present triggers to past wounds, and these connections operate at speeds faster than conscious thought. Have you ever wondered why certain situations or comments affect you so deeply while others barely register? The answer lies in how your brain processes and stores emotional experiences, particularly traumatic ones. When something in the present moment resembles an aspect of past pain, even in subtle, unconscious ways, your nervous system responds as if you're experiencing that original hurt all over again. Think of your brain as having created a specialized alert system. Just as your home security system detects movement and sounds the alarm without analyzing the actual threat level, your brain's threat detection system operates with similar efficiency. When it detects something similar to past pain, it triggers an immediate protective response. This process happens almost instantaneously. Emotional triggers activate neural pathways that bypass your rational thinking brain, creating a survival shortcut. Your amygdala, the brain's emotional processing center, takes control before your prefrontal cortex has a chance to analyze the situation logically. This explains why you might intellectually know your partner forgetting to call isn't actual abandonment, yet your emotions and body react as if you've been completely deserted. The brain stores emotional memories differently than regular memories. While you might forget what you ate 3 days ago, your brain maintains vivid emotional imprints of painful experiences from decades earlier. These emotional memories exist in a timeless space, without clear timestamps, ready to activate whenever something similar appears. This creates time distortion during triggering events. Your brain experiences the present and past simultaneously. Consider someone who experienced rejection when speaking up in childhood, during a team meeting where their boss overlooks their raised hand. They're not just disappointed about missing their chance to share an idea, they're experiencing that childhood humiliation all over again. Flushing face, racing heart, overwhelming shame washing over them exactly as it did years ago. These neural pathways strengthen with repetition. Each trigger activation makes the pathway more established, like a forest path becoming more defined with each passing. Your brain becomes increasingly efficient at making these connections, explaining why triggers often become more sensitive over time rather than less. This connects to a psychological process called repetition compulsion. Research shows this isn't random suffering. It's your psyche's attempt to resolve unprocessed trauma by creating similar scenarios where you might achieve a different outcome. It's as if your unconscious mind is saying, Maybe this time I can fix it. The person who repeatedly ends up with emotionally unavailable partners, despite wanting connection, isn't experiencing bad luck. Their unconscious is drawn to the familiar pattern of having to earn affection, likely originating in childhood. The neural pathways created by trauma influence more than emotions. They can alter brain development itself. Chronic stress from trauma impacts areas responsible for memory, attention, and executive function. Addressing these wounds can actually improve cognitive functioning and decision-making beyond just emotional relief. These connections form predictable patterns. Criticism often triggers shame wounds, making you feel fundamentally flawed rather than simply imperfect. Physical or emotional distance may activate abandonment wounds, causing panic rather than healthy concern. Being overlooked or interrupted might trigger rejection wounds, resulting in feelings of invisibility rather than mild frustration. Your defense mechanisms, those psychological shields that develop to protect you, now operate autonomously without conscious awareness. This automation explains why willpower alone often fails to change these patterns. You can't simply decide not to be triggered because your nervous system launches its protective response before you're even aware of what's happening. Understanding this connection between triggers and wounds offers something powerful: the possibility of intervention. While you can't prevent triggers entirely, you can create space between the trigger and your response. This space allows your rational brain to come back online and remind your nervous system, this is now, not then. I'm safe. Shadow work, practical techniques for wound identification. That space between trigger and response holds transformative potential, but how do you actually access it? While understanding your emotional patterns is valuable, most people lack the practical tools to translate psychological theory into life-changing insight. Shadow work is a methodical approach to finally begin the conversation with the parts of yourself you've spent a lifetime avoiding. Facing your wounds creates natural resistance. You might suddenly remember urgent tasks, feel sleepy, or convince yourself this work isn't necessary. This resistance actually signals you're approaching important material. Shadow work provides a gradual, structured approach that creates psychological safety while exploring challenging content. These techniques bypass conscious defenses and create direct pathways to unconscious material. Before beginning any shadow work practice, create a dedicated time and private space. Start with less threatening material before tackling major traumas, and consider working with a therapist for particularly challenging wounds. This foundation of safety enables the techniques to work effectively. Journaling offers an accessible entry point by creating a private space for vulnerable expression. For effective shadow work journaling, try these specific approaches. Set a timer for 15 minutes of stream of consciousness writing, no stopping, no editing, to reveal surprising insights as your unconscious mind takes over. Write unsent letters addressing your inner child. Dear 8-year-old me, I understand why you felt abandoned when, or expressing emotions to someone who hurt you. Balance heavier material with self-esteem and gratitude, journaling that reconnects you with positive aspects of yourself. Trigger tracking helps map your emotional landscape. Create a simple log with columns for 1. The situation that triggered you. Intensity rating 1 to 10, 3. Emotions experienced 4. Physical sensations 5. Thoughts that followed. After collecting several entries, patterns emerge. You might discover that feeling ignored in meetings triggers a 9 out of 10 response, while criticism of your work evokes a milder reaction. These patterns reveal your personal wound landscape. Your body itself serves as an honest chronicler of your emotional history. Try a simple body scan. Lie comfortably, bring attention slowly from your toes to the top of your head, noticing areas of tension, pain, or numbness. When you encounter discomfort, Gently ask what emotion might be stored there. Your shoulders might hold anger, your throat harbor unexpressed truths, or your stomach contain unacknowledged anxiety. Dreams offer another rich territory when conscious defenses relax during sleep. Keep a notebook by your bed to record dreams immediately upon waking. Look for recurring themes rather than using generic interpretations. A dream about being chased might reveal avoidance patterns, while dreams of being unprepared could point to imposter syndrome linked to a worthiness wound. Active imagination, from Jungian psychology, involves generating waking visualizations to access symbolic meanings. You might visualize sitting across from your inner critic and asking, "What are you trying to protect me from?" Or create a safe container, like a treasure chest, to hold difficult emotions. This practice accesses unconscious material intentionally rather than letting it erupt unpredictably. The most effective approach combines multiple techniques. You might notice a trigger in daily life, document it through journaling, explore related bodily sensations through a body scan, and then use active imagination to communicate with the wounded part of yourself. This multifaceted approach creates numerous pathways to material that might otherwise remain hidden. With consistent practice, many people report recognizing their triggers in real time rather than hours later. This growing awareness creates that crucial space between stimulus and response, the space where choice becomes possible. Where you once reacted automatically from old wounds, you gradually develop the capacity to respond from present awareness. Relationship revolution, the healing power of integration. As your capacity for self-awareness deepens, an unexpected dimension emerges in your relationships. Those partners, friends, and family members who trigger you most intensely aren't just difficult people. They're unconsciously selected players in a drama your wounds have been silently directing. What makes this revelation so powerful is understanding that your closest relationships aren't random. They've been carefully orchestrated by your unconscious to bring your deepest wounds to the surface. When we lack awareness of our shadow material, we engage in what psychologists call projection, a defense mechanism where we unconsciously attribute our own unacceptable qualities onto others. Think about your most challenging relationship right now. The traits that frustrate you most in that person likely reflect parts of yourself you've been unwilling to acknowledge. This psychological mechanism shows you what needs healing. Our wounds influence who we're attracted to and determine the entire script of our relationships. Those recurring patterns across different partnerships, consistently finding yourself with emotionally unavailable partners or repeatedly feeling unappreciated, reveal how we unconsciously seek out people who will activate our core wounds. This explains why rational relationship advice often fails. Relationships function as mirrors, reflecting back both our light and our shadow. Every conflict, every misunderstanding, every trigger holds up this mirror, showing us not just the other person, but ourselves, often the parts we'd rather not see. Consider this. When a person finally recognizes their projection in a relationship, they might realize, "I'm not actually angry at my partner for being controlling. I'm seeing my own unacknowledged need for control reflected back at me." This awareness transforms communication from accusation to understanding, creating space for genuine connection. When caught in a trauma bond, where partners repeatedly trigger each other's unresolved emotional wounds, logical advice rarely helps. You might intellectually understand that your partner isn't abandoning you when they need alone time, but your abandonment wound creates an emotional reality that overrides reason. Your unconscious mind precisely selects qualities that match your disowned shadow material. If you've repressed your anger, you'll likely find yourself surrounded by people whose anger troubles you. If you've denied your need for recognition, you might be hypersensitive to others seeking attention. These mirrors are invitations to reclaim these disowned parts of yourself. The real transformation begins when you start asking yourself, What's being activated in me right now? This simple question creates space between your emotional reaction and your response. When a conversation about household chores triggers intense feelings, you can pause and recognize, I'm feeling anxious about the dishes not being done. That's my childhood fear of disapproval surfacing, not actually about my partner. As you integrate your shadow material, the blame game loses its power. Your emotional reactions stem from your own wounds rather than your partner's behavior, shifting you from accusation to personal responsibility. Imagine recognizing during an argument, I'm not responding to what my partner is actually saying. I'm reacting to how my father spoke to me years ago. This awareness transforms relationship dynamics at their foundation. You begin seeing people as they actually are, rather than as characters in your wound story. Your partner is no longer the embodiment of everyone who ever abandoned you. They become a complex individual with their own wounds and gifts. This clarity allows for genuine empathy rather than the distorted perceptions that projection creates. Most relationships involve some degree of trauma bonding, where partners unconsciously connect through complementary wounds. The emotionally unavailable person pairs with the desperate for love partner. As you integrate your shadow, you break these patterns, opening the possibility for connection based on wholeness rather than woundedness. Taking responsibility for your shadow means recognizing your power to change dynamics. Every time you notice yourself projecting or being triggered, you gain an opportunity to choose differently. The path isn't always comfortable. There will be moments when you slip back into projection or old wounds feel fresh again. But with consistent awareness, these moments become less frequent and less intense. The freedom that emerges when you're no longer unconsciously driven by your wounds allows you to choose relationships based on genuine compatibility rather than unconscious wound matching. By recognizing how projection operates in your relationships, you transform them from unconscious wound-driven interactions to conscious, healing connections. Your relationships no longer simply repeat your painful past. They become laboratories for growth and authentic connection, free from the distortions of unhealed wounds. We've spent our time together exploring the hidden corners of your psyche. But here's the transformative insight. These wounds you're carrying are gateways to profound self-knowledge. As research shows, shadow integration involves recognizing and accepting previously denied parts of ourselves, opening the door to greater self-understanding. This journey isn't about perfection, it's about becoming whole by embracing every aspect of yourself with compassion. When you bring these invisible patterns into awareness, they transform from prison bars into stepping stones. Start small. This week, notice one emotional trigger and get curious. What wound is speaking through this response? Each trigger offers an invitation to healing. Your wounds are waiting to be transformed into wisdom. The patterns you've been repeating aren't flaws, they're messages. Your wounds aren't signs of weakness, they're signposts to the parts of yourself still waiting to be seen, heard, and healed. If this video opened even a small door inside you, don't let it close. Follow that feeling. Notice your next trigger. Ask what it's trying to show you. This is the beginning of turning pain into clarity and reaction into freedom. If you're ready to keep walking this path, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next chapter of Becoming Whole.